and welcome back for Season 2 of Disaster Files, the show where we dig into the history's most catastrophic, mind-boggling, and often deeply unsettling events. The disasters that reshaped the world, and the mysteries buried beneath them. Tonight, we're kicking off Season 2 with a case that is almost too big to comprehend. We're not talking about a single ship sinking or a one city burning. We're talking about a disaster that engulfed the entire planet. An event so strange, so globally devastating, that for the people who lived through it, it felt like the laws of nature themselves had been cancelled. I'm your host, Mayho, the world-travelling girl. This is the story of 1816, the year the sun simply gave up. They call it the year without a summer, the poverty year, 1800, and froze to death. From the misty valleys of Ireland to the bustling streets of New York City, the story was the same. Perpetual winter. Snow in June, frost in August, a sun that shone with all the warmth and power of a distant, dusty coin. The central questions of the disaster are twofold, and they are massive. First, what in the actual hell happened? What force of nature could possibly plunge the entire world into a seemingly endless winter? And secondly, the more human question, how did society not completely collapse? How did people survive when the very concept of a harvest vanished? This isn't a story of geology or weather patterns. This is a story of human desperation, resilience, and the birth of a monster. Literally. So buckle up. This is a global mystery, and we're going to try and get to the bottom of it. This is the year without a summer, the setup. Okay, to understand why 1816 was so profoundly, pants-crappingly weird, we have to set the stage. What was the world like just before everything went sideways? The year is 1815. The world is exhausted. The Neapolitan Wars, a continental spanning conflict, had been raging for over a decade, had finally, definitely, ended, with Neapolitan's defeat in Waterloo in June. Europe is shattered, bankrupt, a traumatized mess. Supply chains for, important things like food are completely destroyed. But that's just the human drama. Unbeknown to every single person on the planet, Earth itself was gearing up for what can only be described as a perfect storm of terrible conditions. First, we have what's called the Dalton Minimum. There was a period from about 1790 to 1830 where solar activity, sunspots and sun flares, were a historic low. The sun was, for a lack of a better term, running a bit cold. It had turned down its thermostat by almost 1 degree globally. Not enough to notice in your day-to-day, but enough to make the entire system a little bit more fragile. Second, the planet's volcanoes had been weirdly active. There was a massive mystery eruption in 1808. We'll come back to that. It's a whole thing. Followed by significant eruptions in 1812, 1813, and 1814 in various parts of the world. The atmosphere was already loaded with a baseline level of volcanic dust and aerosols. It was an atmospheric powder keg. And then, April 5th, 1815, on an island almost nobody in the West had ever heard of, someone lit the fuse. The big boom. Meet Mount Tambora. On the island of Sumbawa in the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, Tambora wasn't just a mountain. It was a sleeping giant. And in 1815 of April, it didn't just wake up. It woke up and decided to tear the sky in half. The first eruptions on April 15th were so loud that they were mistaken for a faraway cannon fire. British authorities on islands hundreds of miles away accidentally sent ships out to look for a naval battle. But guys, this was just the volcano clearing its throat. The main event began on April 10th. And what happened next? The numbers are just They're not even scary. They're nihilistic. The sound. The explosion was the loudest sound in recorded history. It was heard over 1,200 miles away. For context, that's like an explosion in New York City being heard clearly from Des Moines, Iowa. If you were within a few hundred miles, it wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force that could rupture eardrums. The power. The eruption released energy equivalent to roughly 33 gigatons of TNT. Let's sit with that. The atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. This was over 2,000 times more powerful. Every second of the eruption was multiple Hiroshima bombs going off. The volcanic explosivity index goes from 1 to 8. Tambora was a 7. It was the most powerful volcanic eruption in the past 1,300 years, maybe even 10,000. The destruction. The top 4,000 feet of the mountain were utterly obliterated, vaporized. The island of Sumbawa was wiped off the map by pyroclastic flows, those terrifying superheated waves of gas and rock that move at highway speeds, and subsequent to tsunamis. An estimate of 71,000 people in Indonesia died immediately. But the immediate local apocalypse? That was just the opening act. The real global nightmare started with what Tambora threw into the sky. It ejected an estimate of 37 cubic miles of material. Not just rock and ash, but crucially, sulfur dioxide gas. This gas shot up into the stratosphere, miles above our weather, and combined with weather vapor to form billions upon billions of tiny sulfate aerosol particles. And this is the key. These particles formed a gigantic, microscopic shield that over the next few months would encircle the entire planet. This shield was so vast that it was roughly the size of Australia. What does a shield do? It blocks things. In this case, it blocked sunlight. It reflected the sun's rays back into space, preventing its heat from reaching us. The stage was set. The trigger had been pulled. The world just didn't know it yet. The consequences were sailing, silently on the winds, towards a completely unsuspecting population. And when they arrived, it looked like the end of the world, the unsummer. The first signs that something was horribly wrong began in the spring of 1816. In the northeastern United States and Canada, people had survived a tough winter, but were ready for spring planting. But spring didn't come. May arrived, and instead of warm rains, they got killing frosts. Farmers, beginning the resilient folks they are, replanted. They figured it was a fluke. It was not a fluke. On June 6, 1816, in snowy Albany, New York, in Dennisville, Maine. Let me say that again. It snowed. In June, in the northeastern United States. Not a light dusting either. Inches of it. In Cape May, New Jersey, frost was reported on 5 consecutive nights in late June. The North American Review wrote, in June, another snowstorm spread dismay among the farmers. Another paper simply called it the year of the cold summer. July and August were no better. A strange, persistent dry fog hung in the air, a reddish, yellow haze that dimmed the sun, making it possible to stare directly at it. It couldn't be dispersed by wind or rain. Temperatures swung wildly. On July 4th, Independence Day, people in Pennsylvania were shivering around fireplaces. In Virginia, a farmer wrote of defrost destroying his corn crop in late August. The agriculture disaster was total. Corn froze on the stalk. Wheat and grain crops failed completely. What little was harvested was often mouldy. and oat prices saw a 7,000 price increase. The despair of the diaries in this time is palpable.
Hey everyone, it's Tech here. Before we continue with the episode, I want to give a quick reminder that if you are interested to see more case files in VR chat, make sure to hit that subscribe button right down below. And be sure to turn that notification bell so you can get notified whenever Hayden uploads a new video. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode.
May 28. Weather backward from Sarah Snell, Bryant, Massachusetts. And on June 11th, cold and frost this morning. All was froze, said by the Shaker farmers in New York. This wasn't an American phenomenon. This was global. In Europe, still rebuilding from the Neapolitan Wars, it was even worse. The summer of 1816 was the coldest and wettest on record. Torrential rains in the UK and Ireland rotted the potatoes and grains in the field. The Switzerland, the endless rain and cold forced a group of vacating riders to stay indoors all summer. We'll get back to them. It's important. Food riots, the worst since the French Revolution, broke out in England, France, and Switzerland. Bakers and grain markets were stormed by desperate starving mobs. And as always, famine brought disease. A massive typhus epidemic swept through Ireland, killing thousands of people. Cholera, agitated by the weird weather, began a deadly spread from India all the way to Europe. In China, the monsoon season was disrupted, leading to a catastrophic flooding in the Yangtze Valley. Frost was reported in Taiwan. In India, delayed monsoon season eventually arrived with devastating floods, therefore worsening the cholera epidemic. The entire world was sick, starving, and freezing, and nobody knew why. So naturally, they started to guess. And theories. The theories are a wild ride. Theories of doom. So you're living in 1816. Your family is hungry. You're wearing a winter coat in July. The sun looks wrong. The snow is the wrong colour. How do you explain it? You get creative. The explanations people come up with were a mix of semi-scientific and downright supernatural. Theory 1. Sunspots. This was the leading rational theory. Because of the dry fog, people could stare at the sun and see large dark spots on its surface. Many thinkers and newspapers blame these sunspots for blocking the sun's heat. They were wrong. Sunspots are actually associated with more solar activity. But it was an attempt. Theory 2. Divine wrath. This was a hugely popular one. Preachers across Europe and America proclaimed that the strange weather was God's punishment for a sinful world. Revival meetings sprang up everywhere. People were convinced that they were living in the literal end times. Theory 3. Benjamin Franklin's wild guess. Okay, this one's a little closer. The famed scientist had theorized years earlier that a massive volcanic eruption in Iceland, Laki, in 1783, had caused a cold winter. A few scientists in 1816 began to tentatively connect the dots, suggesting that maybe a volcano somewhere could be to blame. But without global communication, they couldn't prove it. Theory 4. The really weird ones. Some thought the dry fog was smoke from vast unexplored forest fires in the Pacific Northwest. Others thought it was fumes from the polar ice caps, somehow released. They were all stumbling in the dark. They were all trying to solve a global climate mystery with only local knowledge. It was terrifying, confusing, and utterly bizarre time to be alive. The science and the aftermath. So, was it God? Was it sunspots? Was it the fumes of the earth? No. The real explanation, which we piece together much later, is a much more simple and much more terrifyingly complex. It was science. What the people of 1816 experienced is what we now call a volcanic winter. Remember that sulfate aerosol shield from Tambora? That was the culprit. Those billions of tiny particles acted like trillions of microscopic mirrors, scattering incoming light and preventing its heat from reaching us. They also massively distributed global weather patterns, like the jet stream, which is why some places flooded and others froze. Modern climate models and ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica confirm this. They show a massive, undeniable sulfur spike in the layers corresponding from 1815 to 1816. The science is settled. The mystery, it seems, is solved. But the story isn't over, because the aftermath of the year without a summer, it literally changed the world. The westward expansion. In New England, thousands of families gave up on their failed farms. This triggered a massive migration west to the Midwest, like Ohio and Indiana, accelerating the settlement of the American interior. The birth of modern climate science. This was the first time a global climate anomaly could be investigated with semi-modern methods. It forced scientists to think about interconnected global systems. A literary monster. Remember those writers stuck in the villa in Switzerland? Those ones forced inside by the endless rain. That group included Mary Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and Lord Byron. To pass the time, they had a ghost story contest. The story Mary Shelley began writing that haunted, summerless summer was Frankenstein, a novel born from the darkness of the world that felt like it was dying. Lord Byron also wrote a poem that year called Darkness, which began, I had a dream, which was not a dream. The bright sun was extinguished. So, do we close the case on a year without summer? On one hand, yes, the case was unequivocally Mount Tambora. The evidence is overwhelming. But is the story really over? First, the lingering mysteries of 1808 eruption. Ice cores show another huge eruption then, but we have no historical record of it. Where was it? Did it help set the stage for the Tambora chaos? We still don't know. Second, and more importantly, 1816 serves as a haunting warning. The global temperature drop that caused the worldwide famine was only about 1 degree Celsius. Scientists project that a human-driven climate change, the global average temperature could increase by 2 to 4 degrees this century. The chaos, the crop failures, the starvation, the mass migration of 1816, all of that was caused by the drop of 1 degree Celsius. So, the mystery of what happened then is solved. But it leaves us with a far more terrifying and pressuring unsolved mystery. What are we doing now? And how will we deal with the climate disruptions we are actively creating? The year without a summer was a tragedy born of natural ignorance. The question is, will we repeat the tragedy? But this time, with full knowledge of what we're doing? And that incredibly cheerful note is our case. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And as always, until next time on the Disaster Files, stay curious and maybe pack a jacket, just in case.
What disaster do you want to see next? Comment below. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and feel free to share this video with anyone who might enjoy it too. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next video.